All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. That was kind of loud, huh? So, the 2020 presidential election. Lord, let me just say, this has been one long, drawn-out marathon of extremities and craziness. That's what it felt like to me. It just felt so drawn out. I'm not gonna lie though. I slept very good last night for the first time since Tuesday. Because, man, the thing about elections is that elections kind of bring out anxiety and stress for some people. And some people just, you just want to know. And you hate having to wait. And, for me, the trigger point was every time, you turn on the news, it's breaking news. I'm like, okay, here we go. They're about to go ahead and say it went to this person. The votes are still being counted. Too close to call. I'm like, all right, here we go. We do this a few more days. Okay. And so that was the election for me. To be honest, I didn't even watch on Tuesday because I already figured they weren't going to have it together. So me and a few other friends, we got on Google Hangouts and I had my ice cream. We tried to make our own little peace bubble just so we wouldn't be stressed out about the election. And so I thought I could have my peace bubble and everything and then wake up on Wednesday to the results. In addition to that, then my younger brother FaceTimed me right after my little peace bubble Google Hangout was a wrap. My brother FaceTimed me with my little nephew in there. Now, my nephew's like 6 months old, but he was having a moment. So, when I answered the FaceTime, the baby just hollered. Ah! I was like, yeah, all right, you're messing up my peace here. You're messing up my peace. All right. But, yeah, so that was the election for me. But, man, you just saw so much craziness happen, right? Like, literally, first of all, can we start with Paula White? What was that about? Now, Paula White, she's like the televangelist lady. That's how I know her. But she's also Donald Trump's spiritual advisor. And so I guess when it started to look like Donald Trump was probably going to lose, then she had some kind of service and they were doing the prayer and she was praying and she was summoning the African angels. I summoned the African angels. The African angels are coming. I was like, huh? First of all, listen, no disrespect. Africa needs their angels to take care of what's happening over there on the continent of Africa. They got enough stuff going on over there. You gonna even colonize Africa from the spiritual realm too? Really? That's what you're doing, Paula? Trifling. Secondly, listen, I ain't the most, preachy. I'm not a preacher or nothing like that, but I did grow up in church, and from what I understand, any kind of spiritual being or entity, has no correlation with what's happening on planet Earth. And so I don't think angels would have a nationality. I could be wrong, but just from what I remember, I don't think they would have nationalities. And I'm like, why you didn't call the European ones over there? What you bothering Africa for? Leave them alone, please. Let them be great in their own realm, please. Jeez, Paula. And then when she was calling out the names, I don't know if she was supposed to be speaking in tongues or calling names, but to me it sounded like she was speaking some diet Spanish. So I don't know what that's about. Paula, I'm gonna get her later on the next live that I'm gonna do. She's about to get fried up. I've been meaning to get Paula White. And the other crazy part was really just like when you saw the claims of voter fraud start popping up out of nowhere. I'm like, people are really loony, really loony. And if you want to talk about voter fraud, if anything, the voter fraud was coming from the leadership. You had DeJoy, the Postmaster General, literally compromise over 300,000 ballots that are still pretty much unaccounted for, where he literally defied a judge's order to say, get these ballots to where they need to be so they can be counted. And he just said, I ain't doing that. We ain't doing that. No. And, the crazy part about that is you have some states that have, where their state legislature pretty much put in policy where if votes weren't counted by the third, they weren't going to be counted. So that's like a state like Florida. So even though, 27% of the mail-in ballots that were in Miami-Dade County did not get counted because of DeJoy, even when you bring them back, they're not going to be calculated because it goes against the state law that was put in the state of Florida. So, that's some of the craziness. And then when you talk about just the procedures that different states have, some states had a very smooth process because, again, this was not a traditional election. This was an election where we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so you had 100 million people vote early, and there was a huge portion of those early votes that were mail-in and absentee. Some states already were ahead of the curve and said, okay, we're going to have it set up where as these votes come in early, we're going to go ahead and already calculate and tally them. That way, when the same day voting starts, we can pretty much have our numbers ready to call by the time the polls close. We'll already, be ahead of the game. We'll already kind of know what it's looking like for our state. But you had other states that were like, no, they can come in early all they want, but we're not going to count them until election day. So they're going to sit in that room for weeks at a time. And, some people got their ballots as early as early October. I know I got mine, I think the first week of October, because I did mail in as well. I was not trying to stand in line for 3 hours like I had to last year. Plus, no disrespect, folks are crazy in this country, and around election season, especially because you see people who have literally an allegiance to some candidates, people will be showing up with guns and stuff to the line and trying to drive over people. I wasn't trying to deal with that, so I went ahead and filled out mine, and I went to the white side of town and put it in the mailbox over there, so I knew that it would be received on time. But so the states had different policies, and so you had some states that were like, we're not counting them until election day. And in addition to that, some states would try to go even further and say, again, if the ballots are not counted by the end of the third, they just won't be counted at all. Now that tried to happen in I think 2 or 3 states, and the courts threw that out and said that's illegal. You can't do that. I don't know what happened with Florida, but to each his own. So when they kept saying illegal ballots and fraud, I'm like, no, the fraud was from the leadership, not the people. And then you have the president who keeps feeding into this and talking about, even today, he had a tweet where he said there were over 100 million illegal mail-in votes just in Philadelphia. I was like, 100 million illegal mail-in votes in Philadelphia. Who's counting that? I want to know who's counting all that. Not that room with 10 people in it. Secondly, it's kind of like, who's making all those ballots? The state of Pennsylvania alone only had like 6.2 million people vote. So I'm like, how does the city of Philadelphia have 100 million votes? Clearly, if they did, they weren't counted because it didn't go to the tally. But that's some foolery. He's always out there just saying anything and everything. Because I know if I worked at that ballot factory and I get the order and it's saying, hey, Philadelphia needs 100 million votes or 100 million ballots. First of all, we don't even have that kind of ink because we got budget cuts around here. So we're not printing that. They're going to have to text their vote or something. So I don't know what the president is talking about. He's just on loony train as usual. But again, with him pushing the narrative that there was all of this voter fraud, I'm like, really? It's kind of funny that you start claiming voter fraud when they start counting the votes by Black Americans, the ones that used the mail-in ballots. I'm like, really? That's what we're doing? And then those who were protesting didn't even know, they weren't even on the same page. That's what made it funny. So in states where it looked like Trump may be losing, it would stop the count. And what was funny, they weren't even saying stop the count. They stopped the vote. I'm like, yeah, the voting already stopped days ago. That they're counting the votes. And then they realize, oh, stop the count. But then you get to Arizona, which was at the moment blue, and they thought it may switch back to red, and possibly Nevada as well, because Las Vegas got hit so hard by COVID and the economy really suffered. People thought Vegas, might actually push for Trump. They're out there outside, count every vote, count every vote. I'm like, y'all need to figure out, y'all got to get on. The goalpost just gets moved in all the directions. You know what I mean? People are just loony. I don't say, but again, this has been a long drawn out process, because man, it reminds me of the time when I was fool enough to sit in the movie theater for Lord of the Rings. That movie is literally like 15 days long. It's got to be. The movie is at least 4 hours. It got to be like 4 hours and 10 minutes, 4 hours and 15 minutes. And I remember when I went and saw it, 30 minutes in, I had already ate all my popcorn. I had already drunk all my soda. I was too cheap to buy the refillable cups and the popcorn buckets, and so, because that's like $822. So I was sitting in that movie theater so hungry. The movie took forever to get to the point. Them first 2 hours was real slow. There wasn't a whole lot of fighting and horses jumping across bridges yet. I was like, man, I was going through it. That's what it felt like, waiting for the results to come in, okay? If you're a child that grew up in church, it's kind of like when you got to go to pastor's anniversary service. That is the worst day ever. As a child, Sundays were sometimes my favorite day because I knew The Simpsons came on at 8 o'clock. And I always wanted to be home by 8 so I could watch The Simpsons. But man, if it was pastor's anniversary service, I'd be like, damn. We're going to be here all day because it's going to be 10 choirs that got to come and sing. It's going to be the praise dancer that's going to come up there and the CD going to skip. It's going to be the person that got to do a testimony. Somebody's going to go up there and do a poem. And before they do their poem, they got to address everybody in the church. So I'd like to give an honor to the pastor, to the deacon, to the... But that was the election for me. But, I'm just glad the mess is pretty much over. As far as the actual results, when it comes to Joe and Kamala, they have their work cut out for them because there's a lot. I would hate to have to be president now because you're coming in during a pandemic, during an economy that's falling apart. And of course, Americans are always divided, but people like to push this narrative that there was some point where Americans were united. And I'm still trying to figure out when that was. Because when you want to talk about division in politics, there's one thing to be divided by politics, but then when you bring the conversation of race and conversations of generational wealth and everything else, please let me know when we've been united. I don't even know why we keep buying into that. But, they kept pushing in the conversation of, okay, you got to get everybody united. Good luck. In my opinion, I do think there is a heavier presence of animosity towards different groups, or that the groups have against each other. But if anything, I just felt that in the past, maybe if you want to say that people tolerated each other a little bit better, but I don't think people were united. It was more so, okay, you believe what you believe over there and you do your thing over there. I'm going to do my thing over here. Stay out of my way. That's kind of the energy I think that always existed in America. But as you had the emergence of social media and now you saw the forefront of how people felt about each other, things are kind of more out in the open. And in addition to that, I think with American politics, it shifted from a conversation around actual politics and the well-being of the country to more so a power struggle, where it's us versus them, you versus me, them versus them, that group versus this group, and this group is trying to get this, but it's going to disenfranchise that group, and so on and so forth. And so you have it's a power struggle. It's not even anything about the well-being of the country. It's who can get the most out of the candidate at the expense of anybody else. Now, every group is not doing that, but there are a lot of groups in power that have been doing that. And other groups are over it and are finally calling it out. And so you're seeing that animosity. But like I said, I just don't think the country's ever really been united. I do think there was a little bit more polish over the foolery, if anything. It was just polished a little bit better. You know, it was presented in a nice bow with a ribbon and some nice packaging, but once you opened it, it was the same foolery. I always say the craziness in America, it's literally like, because even when people start talking about like the idea of like racism in the United States, you know, when Barack Obama got in, people pushed this whole thing like, oh, we're post-racial. I was like, no, if anything, I say look at racism like a bag of ice that you get from the grocery store. You know what I mean? Like, as, you know, it's like you put that bag out there, and if you forget to put it in the freezer, it melts and it spreads everywhere. I think that's where America's at the moment. The racism that they tried to hide in the freezer melted, and it's everywhere. And it's not like you can scoop it back up into cute little cubes and put it in the bag and put it in the freezer. Nope, now it's here, and now we got to deal with it. So what's up? And so, yeah, Joe and Kamala have their work cut out for them. And I'll also say, because, you know, there were a lot of people who were celebrating who really just felt relieved that they can breathe. And there were so many folks who were like, I don't know what y'all celebrating for. They ain't about to do this. I was like, listen, let people just have that week. Let people really have that week. Like, there have been people who buried their grandma on Zoom. It's been a rough year for a lot of people. So for this, even though to me it's a lot of symbolism, for some people it means something to them. Let them have it. Because, of course, the work starts literally now. You know, there's so much that has to be done. And again, there's conversations about 2024, you know, and so that means for a Kamala and a Joe Biden, because I don't think Joe is going to run for re-election, there is so much that has to happen in this 4 years to even make, you know, any kind of conversation of a re-election for any kind of Democratic ticket at the moment. Because again, you got 71 million people who were pissed off that Trump lost, and some of those people, it's not even a conversation about Republican versus Democrat. It's some of these people literally worship this man. And that energy is never going to go anywhere. They're going to put it into something else, even if it means creating another Donald Trump, or even if it means somebody out of that Trump circle running for election in 2024. And so there's a lot that's going to have to get done. And so I'm hoping that Joe and Kamala got a really strong cabinet. And, you know, because that's one of the things I'm excited about. I am excited to see Betsy, whatever her last name is, get up out of there. That's the main one I wanted to go. Betsy got to go. You done messed up these kids' schools. It's just like literally every agency that had a Trump appointee is in chaos, whether it's the Board of Education or the Department of Education, the CDC, the EPA, the State Department. I mean, like anything you can think of, they just did. It's just chaos. So good luck to them. Have fun. I will also say, Georgia, I need y'all to do your thing with that Senate race. Like, my main wish, in addition to Crazy Man being up out of there, was I needed McConnell out. McConnell is the one I got the biggest beef with. Like, McConnell has to go. And, you know, for me, the icing on the cake was literally watching him during his debate. And when his opponent was saying, these are all the things that have happened under your watch in Kentucky, and people have died. In addition to that, people are less wealthy now under your watch than they were before you got into office, and people have lost their jobs and foreclosures and homelessness. And then he sat there and laughed. I was like, oh, hell no, you got to go. So, like, please, flip the Senate, because he don't need to be in charge of nothing else. Like, he literally... chaos. This man let the whole country suffer. People needed those stimulus checks. He said, too bad. We're not going to do it. We're going to wait till after the election. Then he said, okay, now we can do it. But then at the same time, when the jobs report came out, he said, no, we don't need them anymore. We're good. Like, he got to go. So people, do your thing in Georgia. Get those registrations. Those of you who are 17 and a half, who will be old enough to vote by that runoff, go ahead and register. Y'all do your thing, Georgia. But man, it's been a lot. It's been a long, long process. And it's interesting because the president does not want to concede. I don't think he's going to concede either. If anything, he'll just dip out when the January 20th comes. I think one of the reasons he really doesn't want to leave is I think he has a lot of smoke coming to him legally, like a lot. There's a lot. And without him being president, some of those protections kind of wear off. And so, you know, he's going to have to fund his own defense and everything like that. And I'm not really sure what his finances look like, but, you know, based on what we've been reading and seeing, it ain't looking too good. So he got a lot of smoke waiting for him. Reminds me of this kid I went to high school with that people used to want to fight every other day. I don't know what the kid did, but Lord, every week somebody was trying to fight him. And so I remember we were on the bus going home from school. This was high school. And we got to the bus stop. There were like 8 or 9 people waiting for him. And so I was like, you probably don't want to get off the bus. You might want to just stay on and maybe get off like 2 stops later. I ain't no punk. I'm still good. All right. Do your thing, brother. So, of course, you know what happened. Like, if it was me, I ain't gonna lie. If I go home and there's 8 people waiting to stump me out at the bus stop, the way I would have slid down in that bus seat and that bus would have... I would have definitely left like 2 or 3 stops later and snuck home. That's all I'm saying. Okay, every fight ain't worth fighting. But, you know, we'll see how this election goes. But there's so much that needs to be done. And again, I think America's had a great awakening over the last few decades where people don't really trust politicians the same way that they do. And so now people want to hold politicians accountable. So I will say, for a lot of the people who are not excited, because I'm not going to lie, Joe was not my candidate, but I just needed Trump out. But still, it's like, okay, now this is the time you put the flames to the feet of these people in charge. You know, the ones who said they're going to do all these things. All right, we're going to see what you're going to do. But also pay attention to the local elections and pay attention to the people who've been locally elected, because that's where the real impact is right there, like the immediate impact. But this will be an interesting 4 years. Very interesting, but at least I can sleep better knowing we won't be shooting Iran anytime soon. Goodness, because that was ridiculous too. That's a horrible way to start off 2020. I'm still pissed about that. You know, you don't want to live in the nation's capital when you think it's about to be World War III. That's the last place you want to live. As far as inauguration, I think it needs to be virtual. I think COVID numbers are just too ridiculous. It's not a good idea to have an entire inauguration. Plus, I'm sorry, don't bring that mess to my city. Like, DC's COVID numbers are good over here. We're all right over here. We're pretty steady. It ain't too bad. So don't bring that mess over here messing up our livelihood because folks didn't want to listen in other states. Y'all stay on over there where y'all at. Anyway, share your 2 cents. I'm out. Subscribe.